طبعا يعني كنت محب للقرآن جدا.
I believe that the Islam religion is the best religion for our people.
إن الإسلام بدا غريبا.
إنما دعوة إسلامية.
رأيت النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام.
How would they accept you as one? You're an American. There are few American Muslims.
This is true, and by being an American and not having not being able to speak the Arabic language, I did strike a snag, a very serious snag, but I was fortunate to have been pretty well known by the officials in Arabia, and they knew too that I had accepted Orthodox Islam. It had been highly publicized in the paper, and I became a guest of the state. I was a guest of Prince Faisal, the present King Faisal, and they made it possible for me to go before the committee, Hajj committee or Hajj court, who examines you and asks you questions about your belief, and if you pass it, then you are okay to go to Mecca. But
you would have to have a translator then.
I had one.
I'm a Muslim. If there is something wrong with that, then I stand condemned. My religion is Islam. I believe in Allah. I believe in Muhammad as the apostle of Allah. I believe in brotherhood of all men.
In April 1964, Malcolm X embarked on the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to the heartland of Islam in modern-day Saudi Arabia. A day following his arrival in Jeddah, Malcolm X was informed that the Crown Prince Faisal had extended a personal invite welcoming Malcolm as an honored guest of the kingdom. And in a gesture of brotherhood and kindness, Malcolm X was entertained and hosted by King Faisal himself following the Hajj ceremonies.
In Mecca, during this religious Hajj, it would be an anthropologist's paradise, because never at any time or any place can you find a wider variety of specimens from the human family together at the same time than during this pilgrimage. Every type of human being imaginable is there. All colors, all sizes, all everything. As I pointed out in the letter, during the religious ritual, you eat actually with your hands. All of the time. I was eating from the same plate with people who in America would be considered white, whose hair was blonde, whose eyes were blue, and whose skin was white. Yes. There were black people, brown people, red people, yellow people, and white people. Every specimen of humanity was represented there. But one thing I noticed about these, they didn't act white. They didn't act like the white people whom I had always known. In studying it, in any Afro-American who's involved in any kind of experience, the yardstick that he uses to measure it is racism. When you find a black man, a so-called Negro from America, any situation he comes in contact with, he's measuring it from the racist point of view, because this is his experience. This is the American experience for a black American, so-called black American, or a black so-called American. So I was studying the situation, and I was asking myself, well, what is the difference between these people and those whom I just left in America? Something is different. And it was their attitude. It wasn't their color, because those were just as white as these. Their eyes were just as blue as these. Their hair was just as blonde as these. Yet they were different. And the difference was not in the color, but in the attitude. So I was searching to find an answer as to why, and I thought I did. The fact that they had accepted the oneness of God, as does everyone who's on that pilgrimage, had the chain reaction effect of forcing them also to accept the oneness of the human family. So that by accepting the oneness of God, they regarded all people, all persons, as part of the human family. They didn't judge them by the color of their skin, but the different complexions present only represented the different complexions that go to make up the human family. Not one being any better than the other, or one being any different from the other. And this was reflected in their attitude, because they looked upon all of mankind as a brother. They looked upon themselves as being nothing but another brother. They didn't have that air, I am white. White to them didn't mean the same thing that it means in America. When a man in America says he's white, he means something much different from what is meant by that man over there. When this man over here uses the word white, right in the sound of his voice, right in the essence of his being, is something that you and I are able to detect, and I think you'll have to bear me witness. Over there I didn't find that. So I said to myself, and I wrote it back, that if Islam, if that philosophy can remove from those people who are supposedly white this ingredient of racism that we have always discovered and felt the results of in this society, if it can remove it from that, perhaps if these people over here with the blue eyes and the blonde hair and the white skin and the bad attitude can study that philosophy and be affected by it in the same manner, perhaps they too can be saved from the disaster that they must inevitably run into if they continue to practice or display the same racist attitude that we see reflected. Now, if this is a change in my original attitude, then let it be. But I'd rather say that travel broadens one's scope.
Do you feel that your message, apparent message of love that you brought back from Islam is the real reason they're after you, because you're not hating as hard as they want you to?
Well, I never did hate anybody hard. But I do know that when I wrote that letter saying that there were white people in Mecca, it shook up a lot of Muslims, because most of the Muslims who follow Mr. Muhammad absolutely believed that it was impossible, physically impossible, I should say divinely impossible, for a white person to go to Mecca. And my trip there shattered that image, or that misconcept.
Soon after his enlightened journey to Mecca, Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabbazz, as he now came to be known in the Muslim world, embarked on a trailblazing tour of Africa. During these visits, he met officials, gave interviews, spoke on national television and on radio stations in various countries such as Egypt, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Nigeria, Ghana, Guinea, Sudan, Senegal, Liberia, Algeria, and Morocco. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, and Ahmed Ben Bella of Algeria had each invited Malcolm X to serve as a minister in their governments.
When my father was abroad, we had a world map on the living room wall. And anytime you got a little lonesome and wondered where Daddy was, we'd run over to that map. And where is he now? And he's in Cairo, which is the capital of Egypt. And he's over here with Nkrumah, and he's over. So there was a different kind of passage that we maintained when he was abroad.
Following a speech at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, the Muslim Students Association honored Malcolm with the Yoruba name of Omowale, which means the son who has returned home. By the time Malcolm left Africa, he had met with most of the continent's leaders. In November 1964, on his way back home from Africa, Malcolm stopped in Paris, where he delivered a lecture at the Salle de la Mutualité. A week later, Malcolm flew to the United Kingdom, and on December the 3rd, he participated in a debate at the Oxford Union. The debate was so highly anticipated that it was televised across the nation by the BBC.
BBC World Service.
Malcolm's reach and influence had outgrown the racial boundaries set by the Nation of Islam. He was no longer just a civil rights activist. He now became a human rights activist.
Are you prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, please. I think you're right in my chair. The audience will have to be quiet. Yes, as I pointed out when I was during my traveling, that nations look, African nations and Asian nations and Latin American nations look very hypocritical when they stand up in the United Nations condemning the racist practices of South Africa and that which is practiced by Portugal and Angola, and saying nothing in the UN about the racist practices that are manifest every day against Negroes in this society. Even in South Africa, those Africans aren't faced with bayonets and aren't faced with police dogs. And when I was in Beirut, I saw a picture on the front page of a Negro being beaten in Tennessee, on the front page of the paper in Beirut. When I got to Cairo, I saw the same picture of a Negro being beaten in Tennessee. When I got to Lagos, I saw the same picture. So were these African nations knowing the brutality that is inflicted upon black people in this country, simply because those black people are trying to get what the Supreme Court said they were supposed to have 10 years ago? I would be not a man. If I was in a position to bring it in front of the United Nations and didn't do so, I wouldn't be a man.
Malcolm X had expressed his desire to work with other organizations and leaders in order to present a legal case at the International Court for Human Rights, in an unprecedented effort to bring charges against the United States for its gross human rights violations against the poor, marginalized and brutalized African American community.
Are you prepared to work with some of the leaders of the other civil rights organizations?
Certainly. We will work with any groups, organizations, or leaders in any way, as long as it's genuinely designed to get results.
I judge a man by his conscious behavior. I am not a racist. I don't subscribe to any of the tenets of racism.
Then there are good whites and good blacks and bad whites and blacks.
It's not a case of being good and bad, good or bad blacks and whites. It's a case of being good or bad human beings.
Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabbazz opened America's eyes to the message of Islam. His example opened many hearts to the collective call of brotherhood. His biography demonstrates the universality of Islam for all people, regardless of race or status. Finally, he rejected racism and embraced racial equality. He submitted himself in humility and dedication before the one and only God.